Hello everybody and welcome to another video. The way I do these is I try and read the story at the last possible second, so I've got stuff to say just before I make the video. And sometimes I'll finish reading and then go back up and do a fair bit of analysis and come back. And sometimes I'll read the story and love it so much I just instantly have to record. I'm happy to say this is the latter. This is a great story today, guys. Really, really cool. I'm so disappointed in myself for missing it. And a lot of what I've talked about on this channel to do with a certain mysterious character, I have completely neglected to mention what this story covered. I love this. This is great. Okay, so today, guys, we are going to be looking at Marjorie's story, The Last Straw. This, for some reason, though it wasn't particularly long, was split into two parts. So there's a part 1 and a part 2. So it's sort of like two stories, but it's only one. To catch you guys up, this story is about Marjorie Gw2. This was a character that we met during the Dragon Bash events when the Aetherblades first made themselves known. Marjorie is a Canthan, which we found out in-game during the Dragon Bash. I guess she's like Canthan born, but she's always lived in Divinity's Reach as far as we're aware, or Kryta at the very least. But she is a Canthan necromancer who is a detective. She's a detective because this was during that time where ArenaNet, as a part of the Living Story, did this really cool film noir style, and all of the writing was very short and snappy. It was in a very film noir style, and we haven't actually seen her since the events of the Dragon Bash. I'm wondering whether it's not because she's irrelevant to the plot right now, but rather because if they feel like if they bring Marjorie back, they have to bring back like that whole style too. They have to go the whole hog. That would be a shame. I think if she makes sense to come into the story, she should just be a part of the story. But you know, maybe that's not got anything to do with it. You may also remember during the Dragon Bash event, so this was when Councillor Theo Ashford was assassinated, Marjorie helped us to pin Trin as the villain. Marjorie also worked with another character that was introduced even earlier than Marjorie was, Lady Casimir Mead, who was introduced during the Secret at South Sun, which was one event prior to this as a part of the Living Story. Casimir is the character that has a mini after her that's basically just a naked lady and is far more expensive than Lord Farron just because of that, which is amazing. Casimir, in turn, is actually an old friend of Farron's, and Casimir revealed to us at the Secret of South Sun while she was talking to Lord Farron that she works with Marjorie Gw2, and in fact she was basically spying, so it would seem she was fact-finding for Marjorie Gw2 on the Secret of South Sun. What she found out eventually, we don't really know. But back to Marjorie. In-game also is one final thing as a part of the Dragon's Bash. Once we were finished, there's an item in-game called Marjorie's Journal, which practically speaking allows you to double-click it while you're in a city. It will play those awesome cutscenes for you. It's like a way to repeat cutscenes, which is something I want ArenaNet to tap more into. But this idea that Marjorie has a journal is basically expanded on in the story I'm about to read. Marjorie's story is written from a first-person perspective, and it seems to be an excerpt from her very own journal. It's very cool, an interesting style. It was written by Angel McCoy on June 19th, 2013. Let's get tucked in. It's a good story, guys. The boy couldn't have been older than 18. A pool of blood reflected in the lights of Divinity's Reach, and his death rattle still echoed back and forth between my ears. I stated the obvious. You killed him. I did my job. Ministry guard Henrik Baker had moved in so close I could smell the smugness on his breath. His uniform matched my own, the scarlet and silver I'd worn since joining the Ministry Guard. He'd taken the same oath I had to protect and serve the Krytan Ministry and Divinity's Reach. And yet he'd murdered this citizen without trial or hesitation. With one quick movement, unexpected by either of us, I slammed him against the stone wall. My forearm pressed hard up under his chin, my feet braced against retaliation. I ignited a gleam of necromantic fury at my fingertips near his eye where he couldn't miss it. He shied away, turning his face from the threat. My voice didn't sound like my own. We were just supposed to take him in for questioning. Those might have been your orders, but they weren't mine. Baker had the nerve to sound pleased with himself, as if he'd one-upped me. It was a need-to-know mission. The Ministry had heard rumours that the boy had witnessed a gruesome crime. My immediate superior had dispatched Baker and me to bring him in. Bring him in. Not kill him. You won't get away with this, I said, lacking anything wittier. What can you do? Turn me over to the Seraph? This was sanctioned by brass in the nosebleed offices, way above our ranks. I'd be out of the holding cell before the Seraph had even finished grilling you. Then, you'd be the one in trouble, not me. My gut told me he was right. The stink on the Ministry Guard had been turning my stomach for far too long. I gave one last shot at his chin, banging his head against the stone, then released him. I did not, however, turn my back on him. "Good call," he said. "Listen, don't be naive. What's one dead stranger out of thousands in this city? The ministry keeps us safe, and that's all that matters. You keep your head down and do what you're told. Maybe you'll earn that need-to-know status. I'm heading back to the offices before some nosy citizen comes along." I was shaking so badly I couldn't even answer him. I just watched him walk away, listened to the steady tap of his wooden heels on the cobblestones, and chewed on this last straw, this final, irrefutable stick of evidence that I was in with the wrong people. "Hello?" someone said in a voice as quiet as the grave. I turned on my heel and found myself face to face with a ghost. The boy's ghost. My necromancy surged in me, responding to the presence of the recent dead. I let the power swell and flow through me. That was part 1, guys, and then part 2, which was released on June 21st. "Hello?" the ghost boy repeated, starting to panic. "Is someone there?" He had his back to me. I kept my voice soft, as if speaking to a cornered animal or frightened child. Both applied. "Mendel, it's okay. You're not alone." I could ease his passage, if nothing else, send him to the mists, where, well, who knew if it was any better than here? Probably wasn't. Who are you?" The Aether warped his words. "It doesn't matter anymore. Tell me one thing and then I'll send you to the gods. What crime did you witness yesterday?" The boy's translucence rippled, and I saw the fear in his face. I directed my magic at him, guided it over him like a mother's touch, and saw him relax. "You can tell me." He buried his face in his hands. "They took a woman into a cellar. They used dark magic on her. She screamed, but it was silent. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes..." Okay, who did this? For the first time, the ghost boy looked straight at me. Minister... Energy crackled behind me a fraction of a second prior to the blast. It shot past my left ear and instinct sent me rolling to the side. But the spell hadn't been intended for me. It hit the ghost boy square in the chest and threw him back, off his feet, into mid-air. The ghost boy screamed as his chest imploded, then was sucked into the mist through a hole torn in the fabric of the world. I landed on my feet in the next moment, but it was too late for the ghost boy. I shifted into hunter mode. The other necromancer had already turned tail and run, leaving an energy trail I could follow if I hurried. I sprinted. At the end of the valley, I threw out into a wide street and stopped, scanning for my prey. A cloud of dead air burst up around me, latched on and would not let go. Putrid, the air contained particles that clung to my skin and clothes, lingered inside my mouth and nose, and made my eyes water. I steeled myself against it. You'd think a necromancer would be used to it. But not that smell. Your body reacts automatically. I fought back the urge to gag and searched my surroundings. There! A black cloaked figure slid through the shadows on the far side of the street. I ran after the figure and was catching up when it turned another corner. I'd learned my lesson, so I slowed to a stop, crouched and peered around the edge. No nasty spell hit me in the face. No target was waiting for a fight. No one. I stood slowly, and as I reached my full height, a body came up gently behind me, arms wrapped so intimately around me that my fight or flight instincts never kicked in. Then, a knife appeared at my throat. I froze. When you've been had, there's not much you can do but listen. A deep voice whispered next to my ear. Calm. I sensed no necromantic power radiating from my captor. This was someone different. The man you're chasing is Craig the Bleak. Magic for hire. You'll probably never see him again. I asked, "Who are you?" "Listen closely," the deep voice said. "There are forces at work in this city, in this world, that will take us all down if we let them. Together, you and I can make a difference." My body was relaxing, senses expanding, and I'd finally caught my breath. And what a positive start to our relationship. My sense of humour was even returning. "One you won't forget. I'll be in touch." You can call me E. Before I knew it, I was released, throat intact. I spun around, but no one was there. My captor, E, had left me standing, alone on a moonless night, at the edge of a cobblestone street that smelled of rotting vegetables and dog droppings. And all I could think was, I need a new job. The next day, I turned in my badge. The day after that, I took my first case as Marjorie Gw2, private investigator. I hired myself to unravel the conspiracy behind the Ghost Boy's murder. I haven't succeeded yet, but I will. If nothing else, everyone ends up in the mists eventually, and we necromancers come with a large dose of patience. What? E? I had no idea there was this whole thing to do with E. What the hell? What is wrong with me? I'm so disappointed in myself. So incredibly disappointed in myself. There you go, guys. That's the story of Marjorie Gw2. Every character that was mentioned there, this idea of this ghost boy, E, obviously, the ministry guard that Marjorie was with, and even the name of the necromancer that was fleeing. I've wikied them all, done what I can to try and find out whether they actually exist in game. They do not. This is like all outside of the realms of what we've seen in game. There's very little extra information we can get out of this story, which, you know, might be why I'm so excited by it. I will give you my running thoughts as I went through the story, though. First, I just quite liked it was in first person. It was a nice little change in style. I like the idea that this was a part of Marjorie's journal, and I'd love to get more from her too. What if in a couple of weeks we just get like another update on her journal and like what she's been doing, because she's just like disappeared from the story. Oh my god, it's crazy. But more on the running thoughts. First, I like that there's more ministry guard. I always loved that about the lore. Really, some people don't like all this stuff to do with, you know, the upper class and the dignitaries and the nobles bickering and all that angle of Divinity's Reach. I really like that. And I was looking forward to seeing a lot of that at the Queen's Jubilee, but of course we just didn't get it. Queen's Jubilee would have been a great place for Marjorie to have come back into the story, but of course she wasn't there really either. But yeah, we actually get a bit more on the ministry guard. There was so much before the game came out setting those guys up, and then the personal story, I've said it before on the channel, I think that the personal story just sort of ruined the ministry guard. They just made them flat up the evil guys, and while they're still basically just the evil guys in this story, we do get that greater interaction with them through, you know, a real story rather than the personal story in game presented to us. I also enjoyed about this story that it was a real example of necromancy and the magic of being a necromancer impacting a character in some way, and, you know, actually affecting the story, because one of the big questions, I think, before Guild Wars 2 launched that people always used to ask is, hey, we've got all the professions. Do people view necromancers differently? Do they view these people differently? But necromancers, mainly, all the time, people were like, are they shunned by society or what? And ArenaNet just never really... The answer to that was, oh yeah, sort of, you know, but it's not a big deal kind of thing. It was very much kind of an answer, nothing they really dived into. Like, they didn't want players to feel like they were being discriminated against because of picking certain professions, or they just never really dived into how those magics and the way that people develop those magics actually affect their lives. Like, we've never had much of that in Guild Wars, in any other franchise at all. So it was nice to see this. It was nice to see that her necromantic powers were being referenced so heavily. I think that's a nice way to define a new character that they add to the story and keep that character sort of interesting as compared to other ones. Another cool bit that we had halfway through there was a contemporary human perspective on the mists. She says, who even know, you know, I spend my life sending these souls to the mists, basically. Who even knows if there's anything better out there, you know? And the humans don't know this anymore, which is great. You compare that to 250 years ago, to compare that to Guild Wars 1, where we had Gwen, whose mum died, like, early on in the game, and then, like, basically, Gwen could just have free trips whenever she wants, la-di-da-di-da, to go to the underworld to have chats with her deceased mother, and talk to her mum about, oh, hey, look, this is happening with me, I'm getting married, and on and on and on, you know. That was a really different world that they lived in Guild Wars 1. I also think that bit of the story was kind of, weird that that was a thing in Guild Wars 1 as well, because it sort of undervalued the importance of death. You know, oh, the character died, it doesn't matter, I'll just go visit them in the underworld. And there wasn't much of that in the first game, but Gwen being able to do this did sort of undermine a lot of the importance of character deaths. But now the point though is you compare that to Guild Wars 2 of today, and these humans just, they're so lost. You know, they used to have this kind of connection to the mists just through the avatars of the gods, and they used to have this assured understanding that they were being looked after by these gods, these beings of the mists, and now they have none of that. And the more that ArenaNet show us this and demonstrate this to us, I would really enjoy. They don't have to be bigging up the gods all the time to make the human faith side of the story interesting to me. They just need to talk more about how the humans are losing their faith. Talking about the mists, we get a term here as well. They say the boy's voice was distorted by the Aether. Aether is a frequently returning term, especially recently with the Aether Blades, of course. One thing I never mentioned in that video I did about the Thormanova reactor that sort of tied that whole mystery into the Asuran personal story stuff. Someone left a comment that was fascinating to me, that the Asuran personal story stuff where you're playing with the Infinity Ball and opening up all these alternate realities that we're suggesting perhaps the Aether Blades come from, where you're doing that, you actually go to a lab called the Aether Vault Lab. Like, Aether is a term that it has not really been defined to us, but just keeps coming up and up and up and up again. My best interpretation of what the Aether really is for Guild Wars lore, okay, this is my best interpretation, is that it's the magic of the mists, would be the way I best understand it. Aether is a term that is thrown about to do it whenever we're talking about the mists and the magic of the mists and opening holes in reality and stuff like that. It tends to, or, you know, conjuring stuff from the Aether. This is how this term sort of works, the magic to do with the mist. That's my interpretation. It's not a solid thing. And do consider as well, guys, that there is ether as well in this universe. Ether, however, is a term that appeared more in Guild Wars 1 than Guild Wars 2. Ether, we were just talking about Gwen. Gwen's a great example of this. When you got to play Gwen's story in the first game, you could read about how people were creating mesmer spells, and they would create mesmer spells by, like, manipulating the ether. So we've got the Aether and the ether, very complicated-ish sounding. Ether, as opposed to Aether being a term for the magic of the mists, ether would be more a term that was so associated with, like, energy. Energy, you know, to cast spells in the first game, you'd have to spend energy, and, you know, just sort of magic in general, I guess, would be the ether. But there's a difference between these two terms, and Aether in particular is a more and more important one lately. So that's sort of the way I've started to define it in my own mind. Aside from that, what else can I say? I really liked the writing. My favourite line in there was definitely about how E's hands wrapped intimately around me, like, and then the dagger comes up. It just makes you think of, like, a great spider just sort of clawing around her, but so softly. It's brilliant. What a fantastic line to define how mysterious and weird this character is, and how we don't really even know what side he's on. You know, he's threatening her with a knife, but he's doing it intimately. You know, there's this bizarre sort of juxtaposition to that. I love it. E, we still don't know who E is. There's been no real new evidence, but this was a fantastic story about E. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I certainly did. Today, just so that you all know, today I was actually going to do a video about Guild Wars 2 in, like, the general MMO space. Like, I was going to compare, it was completely different to what I've ended up doing, but it was going to be about, you know, how Guild Wars 2 stands with WildStar coming out, with Elder Scrolls Online around the next corner, with FF14 just come out, and then even EverQuest Next way down the line. I think that's a really interesting topic, but it's just huge, and I feel like I'm kind of scared I'm going to fuck it up because I don't really know those franchises that much, but I would love to do a video on it. If anyone has any comments or wants some discussion about that to maybe help inspire me, do feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you want to talk about the story, then that's perfectly understandable too. I will eat it up regardless. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. There will also be a Guild Wars 2 Mysteries coming up too. It might not be tomorrow because that might be this sort of MMO video, but after that, Guild Wars 2 Mysteries, trust me. And I'm going to be doing one on Kunavang, probably, will be the topic. Probably. It might be the Scepter of War. I don't know. I'm rambling. I'll see you next time.